Please welcome Rod Rosenstein.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Don. I'm very grateful for your longstanding support, and I'm very happy to be back home in Maryland. I last spoke to this organization 2 years ago, almost to the day, at your annual ceremony. That was a very busy time in my life, to say the least. I had left Baltimore for Washington less than 3 weeks before. My days were filled with 12 hours of back-to-back meetings, and my nights were occupied with briefing books and other urgent matters. At the time that I had accepted your 2017 dinner invitation, I was still serving as United States Attorney while going through the Deputy Attorney General confirmation process and while helping to assemble the political team to run the Department of Justice along with Attorney General Jeff Sessions. I had very little time to focus on the dinner. Now, my previous meetings with the GBC involved discussions with about a dozen people in your headquarters office on Calvert Street. I expected a similar sized crowd at this dinner last year. There was a lot going on at the Department of Justice, but the GBC was a very important supporter of my office, now Rob Herr's U.S. Attorney's Office here in Baltimore, a very important supporter of our successful efforts to reduce violent crime, and I think it's important to emphasize that we know that we succeeded in reducing violent crime, and we know that we can do it again if we restore that federal, state, and local coordination that was in place for so many years under the leadership of, among others, Greg Bernstein, who is here tonight. So, aware of all the support the GBC had provided to me, I tore myself away from my desk and set out to meet you for dinner last year. Other things were on my mind as we traveled up I-95 from Washington that evening. The FBI director had been removed the previous week. You might have heard about that. And I recall that as I drove up 95, I took several phone calls to discuss potential candidates to replace him in that job. When we were about a half an hour from Baltimore, my chief of staff asked me, "Do you know how many people are going to be there tonight?" And I did not. He said, "There are going to be 1,000 people." And I said, "That's a lot more than I thought." And he followed up with another question, "Did you know they're going to give you an award?" And I said, "In that case, I better prepare some remarks. We don't have much time." And then my chief of staff said, "The award is for courage in public service." And I said, "You have got to be kidding me." It was an awkward time for me to accept such an award. The FBI director had announced at a public hearing that there was a counterintelligence investigation involving the president's campaign that might result in criminal charges. Then he was fired abruptly, confusing explanations were provided, and troubling allegations were leaked. As a result, critics were arguing that the FBI director's removal was part of an effort to derail the investigation of Russian efforts to influence the 2016 election. I was responsible for that investigation. I was overseeing it. I knew from my briefings with the agents and prosecutors that it was a very important investigation. If it was not done correctly, there would always be lingering doubts about the scope of Russian efforts and about the extent of American involvement. I would never have allowed anyone to interfere with that investigation. I had been in the Department of Justice for over a quarter century. Although I was relatively new to the job, I knew how to manage criminal investigations. The special counsel's report states that the President's counsel advised me on Monday afternoon that the President had decided to remove the director. It was news to me. Nobody said that the removal was intended to influence the course of the investigation. Later on Monday, the President showed me a letter detailing his reasons. Then he told me to deliver a memorandum to the Attorney General with my concerns about the director's conduct the following morning. He did not tell me what reasons to put in my memo. Now, the special counsel's report states that the President asked me to mention in my memo that the FBI director had told him that he was not under investigation, the same language that ultimately appeared in the president's public letter. I didn't include it in my memo because, number one, I had no personal knowledge of what the director had said to the president, and number two, in any event, it was not relevant to my memo. It's important for you to know that I did not dislike the FBI director. On the contrary, at the time I admired him personally, and I appreciated many of his accomplishments at the FBI, and I would be the last one to condemn anyone for a judgment call. These jobs are difficult. They require choices that invite criticism. But while there are many issues in our line of work in which a range of decisions may be reasonable, there are bright lines that should not be crossed. The clearest mistake was the director's decision to hold a press conference about an open case, to reveal his personal recommendation about the case, and to discuss details about the investigation without the informed consent of the prosecutors and the Attorney General, because one of the fundamental principles of federal law enforcement is that the agents investigate the cases and the prosecutorial decisions are made by federal prosecutors and by politically accountable officials in the Department of Justice. The director then chose to send a letter to Congress on the eve of the election, stating that one of the presidential candidates was under criminal investigation, expecting that letter to be released immediately to the public. Now, those actions, in my view, were not within the realm of reasonable decisions. They were inconsistent with our goal of communicating to all FBI employees that they should respect the role of the Attorney General of the United States, that they should refrain from disclosing information about criminal investigations, they should avoid disparaging uncharged persons, and above all, they should never take any unnecessary steps that could be perceived to influence an election. But the director doubled down in his congressional testimony. In essence, he said that he would do it again if he had the chance. Now, if I had been asked to make a recommendation before the removal decision was made, I would have included a more balanced analysis of the pros and cons. But my brief memo to the Attorney General was correct, and it was reasonable under the circumstances. If I had been the decision maker, the removal would have been handled differently, with far more respect and far less drama. So I do not blame the former director for being angry. I would be too if I were in his shoes. But now the former director seems to be acting as a partisan pundit, selling books and earning speaking fees while speculating about the strength of my character and the fate of my immortal soul. I kid you not. That is disappointing. Speculating about souls is not a job for police and prosecutors. Generally, we base our opinions on eyewitness testimony. In any event, I agreed with the then acting FBI director, who testified that the firing would not impact the investigation. On the other hand, I recognized that the unusual circumstances of the firing and the ensuing developments would give reasonable people cause to speculate about the credibility of my investigation. Well, those circumstances are publicly known. I also knew, based on briefings that I received from agents and prosecutors that are now public as a result of indictments that we've returned and information in the public report, I knew that there was overwhelming evidence that Russian operatives hacked American computers and defrauded American citizens. And it was part of a comprehensive Russian strategy to influence elections, promote social discord, and undermine America, just as they do in other countries. And people with connections to the presidential campaign were under FBI investigation in relation to their connections to Russian agents. Now, at the time, these were allegations. They were leads. It's what we call predication. Nobody had been convicted of a crime. Nobody had been charged with a crime. But based upon what I knew in May of 2017, the investigation of Russian election interference was justified. The Department of Justice Inspector General is reviewing aspects of the counterintelligence investigation. Before I left the office, actually about a year ago, I participated in ensuring that there would be a full and thorough investigation. If the Inspector General finds significant new facts, I would reconsider my opinion. But I need to base my opinion on credible evidence. That is what makes the Department of Justice special in America. Now, the President selected me for the job of Deputy Attorney General. The Senate approved my nomination, and I took an oath to well and faithfully execute the duties of the office. As the leader of the Department of Justice, the acting leader for purposes of that case, that oath gave me a legal obligation to make a nonpartisan law enforcement decision without regard to political considerations. I determined that I needed a special counsel to help resolve the election interference investigation in a way that would best protect America from foreign adversaries and that would preserve public confidence in the long run. I knew that some people would not be happy about it. I knew that it would be unpleasant for me and my family. But at my confirmation hearing, I promised that I would conduct the investigation properly and see it through to the appropriate conclusion. In my line of work, you keep promises. And in my line of work, the appropriate conclusion is the result when you follow the process and you complete an independent investigation. You are not out to get anyone. You're just out to follow the facts wherever they may lead. Now, when Bill Barr was Attorney General the first time, for 14 months from 1991 to 1993, he appointed 3 special counsels and 1 independent counsel. Attorney General Barr explained that he just used his inherent authority to appoint special counsels, even though in one case he could never quite understand what the allegation was. There was never any serious question about my legal authority to appoint a special counsel. There was never any ambiguity in the minds of Bob Mueller and his team about the limited scope of his authority or about his responsibility to report to me and my leadership team in the Department of Justice about significant steps in his investigation. With or without regulations, it would be legal to appoint a special counsel. In fact, it is legal to appoint a special counsel for any reason. The Attorney General possesses that power. It is one of the powers of the Attorney General. But as a matter of discretion, we should only appoint special counsels when necessary. U.S. attorneys, the FBI, and the Inspector General, they can capably handle almost all cases. I am not a fan of independent counsels, although I worked for one that I thought handled its responsibilities appropriately, and I disfavor special counsels because I am an advocate of the career men and women of the Department of Justice, and I have confidence in their independence. I'm glad I only had to appoint 1 special counsel in 25 months. As acting Attorney General, though, it was my responsibility to make sure that the Department of Justice would conduct an investigation that was independent both in fact and in perception, completed expeditiously, hold perpetrators accountable if warranted by the facts and the law, and work with partner agencies to counter foreign agents and deter crime, because our job doesn't end with the criminal investigation. We have a broader responsibility as part of the intelligence community to protect America. And we achieved those goals. As a result, our nation is safer. Elections are more secure, and citizens are better informed about covert foreign influence schemes. But not everybody was happy with my decision. In case you didn't notice, I believe I made the right decision. I respect anybody's right to disagree, but in fairness, critics should explain what they would have done with the details as we knew them at the time, and consider how things might have progressed and how long it might have taken if I had chosen a different path. People spend a lot of time debating whose side I was on, based on who seemed to benefit the most from any individual decision. That's because partisans evaluate things in terms of the immediate political impact, and cable TV pundits fill a lot of time by pretending that there is always serious breaking news. But trying to infer partisan affiliation from law enforcement decisions is what you might call a category error. It uses the wrong frame of reference. Political affiliation may influence law enforcement policy decisions, but that is the point of elections. That is why I, when I became U.S. Attorney in 2005, committed to fight violent crime in Baltimore, because it was part of the Bush administration agenda, and because I knew we could help. It's why Rob Hur is fighting violent crime in Baltimore today, because it's part of the Trump administration agenda, and he knows that he can help. So those policy decisions can be influenced by politics. But when it comes to foreign election interference, just like the tens of thousands of other cases I supervised over the past 3 decades, I was always on the same team. I was on the American team. When a case has political significance, I sometimes would ask myself, how would I handle this matter if the party affiliations were reversed? For partisans, the answer is often different. For prosecutors, the answer should be the same. That's the way I played it in Maryland. That's the way I played it in Washington, D.C. That is the way my colleagues throughout the Department of Justice, all around the country, conduct themselves every day. I'm pretty confident that my soul and character are pretty much the same today as they were 2 years ago. I took a few hits and I made some enemies during my time in the arena, but I held my ground, and I also made a lot of friends. And thanks to them, I think we made the right calls on the things that mattered. So that's what was going on when I came to speak with you 2 years ago. When you gave me that award for courage in government service, I probably did not deserve it at the time. I don't know whether I earned it since then. But I tried my best. It's nice to be home. Thank you very much.